It is my privilege to introduce our guest speaker for the evening, host of the Cowboy Libertarian, Mr. Patrick Dorinson. Let's have a warm welcome.
Can you hear me? All right. Good.
It works.
I like to walk around. I can't breathe. Okay, I hope you all don't mind if I wear my hat because I do my best thinking underneath the hat. And I know we're indoors, but I have to wear the hat. I want to talk to you tonight about the future of conservatism. But before I do that, I want to clear up a couple things. A couple people have asked me, are you a real libertarian? The answer is no. I got the name the Cowboy Libertarian from my editor at Fox News Opinion. She said, well, you're out west. Yeah, you're the cowboy guy. We're going to call you the Cowboy Libertarian. I said, that's fine with me, because I haven't joined a political party in 15 years. I'm like Groucho Marx. I'm not going to join any club that have me as a member. So, a couple things, just a couple of news items popped out of me today. One is, do you know the legislature just refused to honor John Wayne?
Yes.
They couldn't get a resolution passed to honor John Wayne on his birthday, May 26th. I won't tell you the reasons why they're so politically correct. It's ridiculous. But, once again, the legislature is hard at work. Spending your money. I want to talk about the future of conservatism, but also about this election we've got going on here. And I'm reminded of, they say California is going to be in play. We're finally going to have our primary matter for the first time in 52 years. Well, 52 years ago, it was Barry Goldwater who was the insurgent, if you will. And the convention was right here in California, at the Cow Palace. And it was a hell of a deal. It was a real good old-fashioned bare-knuckle Donnybrook. Now, Barry was from Arizona, and he was one of the Westerners who started to say, we've got to bring this Republican Party out of the country clubs and take off their fancy white shoes and start making this a party that talks about the issues we all want to talk about. Well, the Rockefellers, and the Romneys, and the Scrantons of Pennsylvania. Well, Barry, we can't have those bumpkins coming into the country club. We have to keep it pure. And there's a lot of people who was working for Barry out in the field, they called them the little old ladies in tennis shoes. And they worked their tails off. And the establishment took a thumping in California, and they took a thumping at the convention, and then they sat on their hands and didn't help. Now, I was 12 years old at the time, and as soon as I could read, my dad started handing the newspaper. We didn't have actual discussions until I was a couple years older, but I read the paper all the time, and I'm watching this campaign in black and white television, and it was fantastic. I was never so excited about something in my whole life. After the convention, I got a bumper sticker for my binder that said AUH2O and 64. For those of you who went to California schools, that's gold water. Now, Goldwater won the nomination, but he lost to LBJ in a landslide. And I mean a real landslide. But let's remember the time. When the election of 64 came along, Jack Kennedy had only been dead for a little over a year. There was not a lot, If Barry run against John Kennedy, it might have been a little different, but he ran against Johnson. Nobody wanted to change horses. Johnson was going to, have all these wonderful stuff, giving away tax dollars, kind of like Hillary and Bernie. But Goldwater still went after it. He went after the nomination, knowing the odds that he was facing, because he had a bigger goal in mind. What was his goal? He was going to try and wrest the party structure away from the establishment and put it on a different path, away from the country club Republicans. He also knew it wasn't about him. You know, every politician today, from the president on down, I, me, right? What I'm going to do, what I'm going to do, and you're going to do, and me, and all this other stuff. That wasn't very Goldwater. He was a good old-fashioned son of the West. Now, he wanted to make sure that conservatism became a governing philosophy, not just somebody on the outside. Some good came of that election, even though he got thumped. The South started voting Republican, which had been solidly Democratic. And a guy emerged from that campaign, a leader. On October 27, 1964, a fellow stood before a microphone in a small audience in a television studio. And he started to talk. And the title of the speech was A Time for Choosing. It's one of the greatest political speeches you'll ever hear in your life. And if you haven't watched it on YouTube, go watch it. And the speaker was none other than a recent convert to the Republican Party, a fellow named Ronald Reagan. That speech raised $1 million in one night for the Republican Party. Now, by today's standards, the last campaign cost Romney $1 billion, and it cost the Democrats $1 billion. $1 million today, in today's dollars, what is that, 4 or 5 million maybe? And look at what he did. He was the one, Goldwater jumped on the barbed wire, and Reagan stepped on it and marched over. It took 16 years, as George Will always likes to say. Goldwater won the election in '64, it just took him 16 years to count the votes. And Reagan became president in 1980. And the rest, as they say, is history. Now, both Goldwater and Reagan, they believed in limited government, free markets, and strict adherence to the Constitution. It sounds almost trite today. Limited government? Even the Republicans are building up the government. Free markets? Yeah, we're going to build them free, but kind of this way and that way and this way and this way. Adherence to the Constitution, to them the Constitution is a set of suggestions. It's not the law of the land. You know what it is? It's a nice piece of parchment that sits in the National Archives. Nobody reads it. When you have a president of the United States that decides, I'm not going to follow the Constitution, I'm going to do it my way, you've got a problem. But they were believing in principles. Their views were not a collection of policy positions like the jokers today. Everybody's got a 10-point plan. Oh, I got a 10-point plan to fix the world. I got a 5-point plan. My 5 versus your 10. It's policy. It's this kind of stuff. No, no, no. No more plans. I don't want to hear any more plans. Policy should be measured against your principles. You don't set policy and then pick up your principles at the next window. But that's what these guys do. Now, conservatives need to return to the fundamentals because the secret to the future of conservatism lies in its past. The first political book my dad ever bought me was this. You ever read it? It's called The Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater. First printing was 1960. Now, it's hard to believe, but in 1960, this book, Conservatism, was the rage on college campuses. A lot of guys who served later for Reagan cut their teeth on this, and they cut their teeth on the Goldwater campaign. Barry Goldwater wrote this book, and if, you know the political books guys write today? My life story, right? And they're going to tell you how everybody's got a log cabin story. My parents were poor. Or your parents were poor. My parents were even more poor. Think what's going to happen 40 years from now. Somebody's going to run for president and go, I grew up in the suburbs. I lived in a cul-de-sac. There was only one way out. And I took it. That's your future. That's the log cabin story going forward. But Barry didn't write this book about himself. This isn't about me, he said. This is about you. These are very simple principles, and guess what? They're just as true today as they were when he wrote it 56 years ago. They're more true today. I'm going to read you a passage. This is important. One of my favorites. You know how we're always talking about tax cuts, right? Let's cut taxes. Well, that's a good idea. But remember, they cost something. Everything costs something. Now, the 8 years when Eisenhower was president, they cut taxes. But as Goldwater says, he says, one problem with regard to taxes is to enforce justice, to abolish the graduated features of our tax law. He didn't like all this stuff, how the system worked. But he said, I believe that as a practical matter, spending cuts must come before tax cuts. If we reduce taxes before firm, principled decisions are made about expenditures, we will court deficit spending and the inflationary effects that invariably follow, thus end the lesson. That's what he said. Now, Reagan, when he made the tax cuts, he thought old Tip O'Neill was going to do spending cuts on his side. Never shake hands with a politician. And if you do, count your fingers after to make sure you still got 5. So what happened? You cut the taxes, but you don't cut the spending. The deficits go up, and you get inflation, you get all this other stuff. What do you think we got now? You got the Federal Reserve, we're at 0.5% growth, and you got the Federal Reserve thinking, we're still trying to figure out what to do. And everybody in Wall Street, when the Federal Reserve meets, it's like the Oracle of Delphi is going to come down and tell us all what to do. Now, the Bushes, 41 and 43, they did more to sabotage conservatism than any two people. Yes, they're nice folks. They have a nice family. They have a nice place in Kennebunkport. We found out when George Bush ran for president, George Bush Sr., that he liked pork rinds. Only after he got thumped in Iowa did he all of a sudden start eating pork rinds. But once he succeeded Reagan, he broke all of his promises. Remember? Read my lips. No new taxes. Right? And as soon as he could, he broke his promise. And he wonders why he didn't get reelected. Now, after Reagan, the party kind of returned to its country club ways. Golf on Saturdays and things like that. And it was, and Bush's cave-in was the first of many cave-ins to come. Remember Bush 41, he ran, it was going to be kinder and gentler Republicans. Bush 43, compassionate conservatism. Right? Thank God we didn't get Bush 45. Now, there's nothing wrong with compassion. There's certainly nothing wrong with being kinder and gentler. That's fine. But the only reason they did that was because they were afraid of the mainstream media. They were afraid of being called mean. Oh, you Republicans are so mean. So a bunch of consultants sat around the table and said, let's figure out what sounds better. How about kinder and gentler? Other than the syntax stinks and the grammar's terrible, yeah, it was a nice phrase, right? Didn't mean anything. But we got to separate conservatism from republicanism, because they ain't the same thing. Political parties are clubs. They're not policy shops. And the Republican Party says they got all kinds of conservatives. Social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, religious conservatives, interventionists versus isolationists, neoconservatives. The Democrats got an easier time. They all just go, what do you want me to do? And there's a little bit of each of these movements in the Republican Party. But as I said, a political party's job, number one, is to win elections. That's what its job is. Oh yeah, they got a platform. Every 4 years they put together a platform. Nobody ever stands on it because it will collapse. And they never bother to read it or live up to what it says because it's just a political document. I've never heard a candidate ever mention the platform once the convention is over and they've swept up all the Confederate. That's the last you ever hear of it. because they don't adhere to it. And that's true for both political parties. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit now about conservatism and the election, but more about the election. When I'm done talking, I do want to take some questions, and just somebody ask me what I think is going to happen, I'll tell you. We're kind of in a situation like the Romans were in. Now, I don't know how much Roman history you guys know, but Rome started off pretty good. It was a republic. Yeah. Worked pretty good. And every now and then they'd elect a guy called consul. And the consul was kind of like the president. Now, Rome had local governments. They had local guys running things, kind of like Tammany Hall in New York. You were responsible for your part of the city. Make sure you take care of it. So they had a political system. If you were a citizen, you had rights. If you were a slave, not so much. So anyway, what happens is Rome was controlled by just a few families. They ran that place. And there was the Senate. And as Will Rogers said, boy, Rome fell and they only had a Senate. We got a house in the Senate. What the hell's going to happen to us? Anyway, the deal is, Caesar's the general, and he's out conquering. I'm going to get them Gauls, I'm going to get them Britons, I'm going to conquer. Well, when you conquer, you also get a lot of wealth. And then he decided, you know something? I think I'd like to just be dictator of Rome. I think that'd be a good job. So, he does. He marches to Rome, breaks all the rules. A bunch of guys in the Senate say, we got to get rid of Caesar. He's going to put us out of work. So on March 15th, they all went to shake hands with Caesar at the Forum, and boom, killed him. Dead. Now, I tell you this story because after Caesar, they had a succession of emperors. And you had Augustus, who was pretty good, and then it started to go downhill to a succession of emperors who were terrible. I think we're in the same situation. We're ruled by an oligarchy, by elites, who want to keep the peasant population just enough in check. Oh, we'll get iPhones and we'll get 50, flat screen TVs. But the system doesn't work. And if we get a bunch of emperors who don't know what they're doing, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And then eventually the barbarians won't have to worry about attacking us. They'll just kick the door open. And it's possible. We all think because we grew up a certain way that it's not possible for America to have the kind of problems that other countries have. It's possible. Don't ever think that a country like the United States couldn't fall prey to something really bad. The Germans were the most civilized country in Western Europe. Look what happened in the 30s and the 40s. The most civilized. Medicine was headquartered in Berlin and Vienna. The great discoveries. So that's kind of how Caesar was. Now, I say we're kind of in that situation now. I'm not saying Trump is a Caesar. But he's going to say, I'm going to take care of your problems. A lot of Trump's success because people are so fed up, they're waiting for the white knight to come and slay their enemies. And what are the enemies? Economic stagnation, cultural shifts that people feel like are being forced down their throat. They have no time to react anymore. A law gets passed, you're supposed to accept this, and by God, you're going to accept it tomorrow. It used to be because before the days of all this instant communication, we kind of, had time to adjust to new things. Not anymore. Political correctness. We're $19 trillion in debt. We're worried about which equipment's going to go in the bathroom. And fear of the unknown. People are scared to death. Because we lost the one thing that's kept us together all these years. The belief that inevitably things are going to get better. When the Japanese attacked the United States in Pearl Harbor, I'm sure there's some people in this room that remember that. But what happened? By dad's 93, or 97, excuse me. And I said, what do you think, Dad? Were you scared? He goes, yeah, in a way, but you also thought, you looked at the guy on your left, you looked at the guy on your right, the woman on your left, the woman on your right. Guess what? We can do this. We can lick these bastards. Right? Nowadays, I don't know if Americans do this. First of all, most people don't even know their neighbors. Go to the suburbs. Go to these cul-de-sac suburbs. See how many people know their neighbors. So, Donald Trump is taking advantage of social media, reality TV, unreality TV, and he's used it. You gotta hand it to him. The guy's running it. I've been in campaigns where you got a policy shop with 40 eggheads who are writing papers all day. You got field operators, you got fundraisers, you got all this stuff. He's got himself, a couple of guys who fly around with him, and that's it. Now, I recently hired some fellows to help him. But he's doing it all himself. And the Republicans, now they're screaming about, how did Trump get this far? My gosh, what happened? If they want to know how it happened, just look in the mirror. After the 2012 campaign, when Romney got thumped, you remember the primary season? He goes on these debates, he's standing there, he's getting the hell kicked out of him. And he's such a gentleman, he doesn't know how to take off his coat, roll up his sleeve, put on a pair of brass knuckles, and pop somebody in the mouth. That's politics. He thinks that, he's the kind of guy that would show up to a knife fight in his tennis whites. But they changed the rules. How did they change the rules? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to be smarter than them people out there. Okay. We're going to front load the primary, so we have a lot of primaries early. And who will that favor? Well, it will favor a well-funded, well-known candidate. Gee, who would that be? Jeb! Exclamation point. I call him that now. I'm getting like Trump. But anyway, so they did it to themselves. All he did was he had somebody at least tell him, Mr. Trump, if we can get this thing rolling, you're going to roll over them like the Germans rolled over Poland. So, what did the Republicans do before Trump? We had 17 candidates. Even Snow White only had 7 dwarfs. And a lot of these folks they're consultant-driven campaigns. And by that I mean, here's how it works. Oh, Ben Carson. Hey, Dr. Ben, how do you doing? Dr. Ben, I'm a consultant. I can make you president. I've written this 50-page strategy memo. And you can be president if you follow it, right? Oh, by the way, I'm the only one that could execute that, and I'm going to charge you $2 million. These are consultant-driven campaigns. I'll go down the list. Jeb Bush, well, he's in a special place. Ben Carson, nice guy, no way he's ever going to become the White House. Chris Christie, I'm sorry, if he can't even keep a discipline over his waistline, he ain't going to be president. Carly Fiorina, you couldn't win a Senate race in California, why should I vote for the president? Jim Gilmore, who? Former governor of Virginia, sorry Jimbo. Lindsey Graham, again, what compelled you to run? Mike Huckabee, working for Fox again. Bobby Jindal, a little too hyper, a little too much Red Bull. George Pataki, another former governor of New York. I'm George Pataki. Go away. I like Rand Paul, but come on, boy. Rand, Poodlehead, sorry, not gonna work. Rick Perry's a good man. He probably should have been in there. Rick Santorum, why is Rick Santorum in there? I won Iowa in 2012. He's, for the rest of his life, he'll walk around the old folks going, I won Iowa in 2012. Marco Rubio, I think it was a little early for Marco. Scott Walker, he tried to parlay what he did in Wisconsin. All of a sudden, now I'm going to run for president. He gets his first foreign policy question. He sounds like Jackie Gleason on the honeymoon. Right? So you had all these guys running for president. Most of them had no business running for president. So they're all split up. What Trump figures out is, I'm starting off with 20% on the natural because people know me. Was on TV for 15 years. I've been Trump everywhere, right? He takes the 20 and he goes to 25. And the establishment's laughing at him. And when they laugh at him, they're laughing at his supporters. And then he gets to 30. He's over 50 now, among Republicans in the primary. But he's winning. That's because these guys were shooting each other. And they came to the table, to the debate table, with their policy papers and all of their knowledge and everything else, and he just said, I'm going to build a wall, and it's going to be tall. That was one. The second most popular line he used was what? I'm self-funded. So they figured, you're not a crook like the rest of them. And that's a little dubious, but... Now, most of these guys had that snowball's chance. I call them vanity campaigns. Or they're auditioning for a new job on Fox News. Now, let's be clear about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a traditional movement conservative. He's got some basics in there. But he kind of tacks a little this way, he tacks a little that way. And we really don't know what the Trump political theory is. And many of his supporters, they're new to the process, and they're understandably mad at the Republican Party. Because for 8 years, congressional Republicans have been unwilling to challenge the president, again, because they didn't want to get in trouble with the media. The media that don't like him anyways. They refuse to use the powers granted to them by the Constitution. Their powers don't come from television, they don't come from the media, they come from the Constitution. That a bunch of smart fellows put together and said, this is going to be the rules of the road. And they didn't even rein in the worst aspect of government. And to me, that is the unelected bureaucrats that write the rules and regulations that if you're in business, you have to follow. And they cripple our economic growth. A bunch of guys sitting in Washington, D.C. in offices are crippling the economy, writing rules and regulations. Congress passes a law, and then they send it to these guys. Without congressional input, they write the rules. They're the fourth branch of government. You thought we had three, right? We got four. And then there's the fifth branch of government. The lobbyists. Yeah. K Street in Washington. The red light district. Ronald Reagan once said that politics is said to be the second oldest profession in the world, and it bears a striking resemblance to the first. Now, these lobbyists, they write laws. Who do you think writes law? The lobbyist comes in and tells the staff, here's how you're going to write this law. That's a great idea. So they're writing the laws. Why? Because their clients want them to write the laws. And it just happens. Now what happens with these staffers that are writing the laws? Then they go be lobbyists. K Street, I don't know how they have any office space left. There's so many staffers who go there and make their 7 figures, and that's the deal. Now, Speaker Ryan, I met him recently, and he had a good proposal. It's simple, but it would work. He said, look, we're going to pass the laws, and we're going to send them to the bureaucrats. And they're going to write the regulations. But then the regulations are coming back to Congress, where Congress says yes or no. Go back and rewrite it. It sounds simple, but you got to start simple in this business. You can't. Everybody wants to bite off big chunks. I think sometimes people who are so frustrated, and I understand the frustration, they think there's going to be some climatic battle between left and right. And one side's going to win and one side will be vanquished. I don't know if we're supposed to shoot the prisoners after that or not. But that would be terrible. That would ruin the dynamic of this country between limited government, those who think government, the Federalists versus the Jeffersonians. Right? That would be crazy, because if that happens, then we got a dictatorship. If one side vanquishes the other forever, you got a dictatorship. It might have the stars and stripes flying behind it, but it's a dictatorship. Don't make any deal. Now, the other quick thing is authorizing versus appropriating. Here's another small thing. Do you know that every program and department of the federal government has to be authorized on a regular basis by the authorizing committees? That basically says, you're good. Now, walk down the aisle there and go talk to the guy at the appropriations desk, and he'll get you your money, because you've been authorized. Tom McClintock talks about this all the time. I'm going to tell you, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, and the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives have not been authorized since 2009, so technically they shouldn't be giving any money. The State Department, they just did it today. They haven't been authorized since 2003. So technically John Kerry should be home with Teresa Heinz Kerry sipping on Chardonnay. The Federal Trade Commission hasn't been reauthorized since 1998. The National Weather Service, a little something important, 1993. And the Federal Election Commission, which is supposed to be the watchdog over our elections, hasn't been authorized since 1981. That's your government at work. Now, the full appropriations process, where you actually give it to a committee, they pass it, it goes through. The full process, and I've been involved in it, it's a good process, hasn't been done since 1994. That was the last time they actually did it to completion. Now, the appropriations, there's 12 appropriations bills. The guys that used to run them, they're called the College of Cardinals, because they were the most powerful guys in Washington. But Boehner and Hastert, you know, the wrestling coach who fondled his players, they didn't like the process, or they were too lazy to do it. So what did they do? You know, every December, what do we have? Well, we're going to shut the government down. Continuing resolution, right? All the continuing resolution does is we're going to fund you at the same level you were funded at last year, and maybe they'll give them a little bump. And what do? Oh, the government's going to shut down. Oh, this is going to happen. Oh, Chicken Little running around, right? That's nuts. These guys should be done with the appropriations process by the end of the summer, every year. And yet, they don't. The simplest job they've been tasked with, and they're impossible. They can't do it. We're on autopilot spending. We don't even know what the hell we're spending things on. Ronald Reagan once said the closest thing you'll ever see to eternal life on earth is a temporary government program. He was right. Now, a couple years ago in my book, I proposed creating an elimination commission. We won't teach them in Washington a new word. Elimination. We'll even spell it for them. One of my first acts, if I was president, was to create this elimination commission made up of folks like you from all across the country. No ex-politicians on it, no lobbyists, you know, none of the bottom feeders that hang out in that 68 square miles surrounded by reality called Washington, D.C. The commission's job would be to eliminate entire departments, agencies, and programs that are ineffective, unnecessary, and just cost too dang much. And unlike President Obama, remember he created the debt commission early on? Thank you for your report. Threw it away. I'd make it work. And all these guys would come in front of you all, the commission, and they'd make their case why they should continue to exist. They'd have 20 minutes to make their case. We've got a lot of stuff to go over. Now, the model of this would be the Base Closure Commission. Remember that? We got to close military bases, costing us too much money, Cold War's over. So what did we do? They put all the bases on a list. There was no amendments to this. You couldn't change it. The Congress had to vote it up or down. And it was quite a battle. There was a lot of lobbying going on, but not to the members because they weren't allowed to talk about it. And it worked. So, let's apply it to other things. And I'll show you why we need to have something like this. In 1898, long-distance telephones was new. Relative. The government put a 3% excise tax on every long-distance phone call to finance the Spanish-American War. began and ended in 1898. But the tax lasted for 108 years until it was finally repealed in 2006. Now, all those years on your phone bill, there was a little tiny charge. You didn't know what it was, but that's what it was. They couldn't even get rid of a tax that wasn't even necessary. Because I think we won the Spanish-American War. We must have paid for it. Didn't even take but a few months. But that's why we need to start right down this stuff. And finally, with the Congress, they started the K Street project in 1994 when Tom DeLay went down to K Street. He shook them down. He said, "You're not hiring enough Republicans. So you better start hiring more Republicans or else we're coming after you." Gee, that's a great way to do business. They were only in it for power and what the power would give them. They weren't in it to help the people. They weren't in it to do the people's business. They were in it to do their business. And when you go down to Washington, you know what it is? You all pay for a congressman's education. And these staffers, they get a nice 10-year education on how the government works, then they go become a lobbyist somewhere. Only the education is what you pay for. Anyway, that's why this establishment's in trouble. And this anti-establishment feeling's been building for a long time. We got the Tea Party, remember? What was the answer for the establishment to the Tea Party? The same thing the establishment did to Barry Goldwater. Lifted their noses in the air and couldn't be bothered with the bumpkins out there. By the way, Roger, what do the bumpkins want? I don't know, but they seem rather upset. Yeah, they're mad. And then they dismissed them. Mitch McConnell said at one point, "Oh, I'm going to make sure we strangle them in their crib." Well, thanks, Mitch. In 2010 or 14, whichever one, who kept you in office? These people. Because while the party was losing presidential elections in 2008 and 2012, the support of the Tea Party people was winning in 2010 and winning in 2014. But at the national level, you put a guy named McCain, who was a nice fella, but he refused to attack Barack Obama on his most vulnerable parts. And then you get Mitt Romney, a nice gentleman, who I wouldn't want beside me in a street fight at all. Mitt Romney would say, "Hi, how are you?" Have you read the book of Mormon? I want a guy beside me who's going to pull out a blackjack and whack him on the head. And they also help Republicans in state elections. Do you know that right now the Republican Party has more officers at the state level than they've had since 1920? When Calvin Coolidge was president, by the way, I'm still a Coolidge man. Yay! Last great president. And what did the Republicans do with their majority? Nothing, absolutely nothing when they were finally given a majority. They abandoned the campaign promises and they abandoned the people who put them in office. And ironically, the establishment is hoping Ted Cruz, who knocked off one of their favorite people, David Dewhurst in Texas, to win a Senate seat, now they're forced to support Ted Cruz because they don't like Donald Trump. Now, if that's not ironic, I don't know what is. And the people are hot and mad, and it's not because the Republicans failed, because they didn't even try. In 1942, they had to pick a commander for the European theater. And they were looking over the resumes of a lot of generals. And one of the greatest American statesmen, the greatest American soldiers ever, George C. Marshall, picked Eisenhower. Eisenhower was barely just been a colonel and had just been promoted to a brigadier. I think that was about as far as maybe 2-star at that time. Marshall brings him in. Mind you, the Philippines haven't fallen yet, but they're about ready to fall. And he says to Eisenhower, "Ike, should we try and save the Philippines, or should we just move on and go to the next battle?" He said, "I want you to go home and think about it." Eisenhower went home and thought about it. He came back the next morning, he told General Marshall, he said, "General Marshall, we should try. The Filipino people and our guys, they'll forgive failure. They won't forgive abandonment." And that's what happened. That's what the Republican Party did. They abandoned the people who were crying out for help. who delivered him victory after victory. And they basically thumbed their nose at him. The GOP right now can't understand the Trump phenomenon. They're going through the stages of grief. I don't know which stage they're in right now. But they've only got themselves to blame. You know, put some bills on the president's desk. That's your job. If he vetoes it, fine. At least you can go to your supporters and say, you know, we keep putting paper on his desk and he keeps vetoing it. Then you keep putting more paper on his desk until you can take the presidency and hold the other offices, and then maybe you'll get it through. But while you're doing it, you do it on two tracks. You push it to his desk, and then you go to the people and you tell them why you're doing it and how it's going to work. They didn't care. They treat everybody out here like you're on the other side of the Potomac. We don't have any idea who you are. And you know, nowadays, a guy goes to get elected to Congress, what happens? Remember the old story about the country girl? She goes to the big city and steps off the bus, and some evil person meets her and turns her out. Makes her go into the vice train, if you will, right? Poor girl, innocent girl. That's what a congressman is. He gets off the bus in Washington, and here comes some guy up. Now, at the bus station, they're pimps, but in this case, they're lobbyists. They start calling them, oh, Congressman this and Congressman that. Here's 2 tickets to the Redskins game. Here's 2 steak dinners. And they forget where the hell they came from. They came from places like Woodland. They came from places like Yolo County. Now, in the future, I'm not as alarmed as many of the bedwetters are in the conservative movement or the Republican Party, because we got a bedwetter wing. These people would soil themselves at the work, and oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Well, stand up and be counted. Now, the future of conservatism, I'm not too worried about. The Republican Party, it's a different story. Trump's either going to wipe the floor with Hillary, or any other Democrat, or he's going to go down to a big defeat, and he's going to take everything with him. Those are the only 2 options. Now, he goes down, this version of the Republican Party is going to go down. And perhaps that's a good thing. Because death precedes resurrection. And sometimes you got to clean things out. Let's admit it, the old orders failed. And Trump has only expedited their day of reckoning. And don't worry, the other side's got their day of reckoning coming too. And it's going to be just as bad. Just because they march in lockstep doesn't mean there's not a problem. Just look at Bernie Sanders. You think Trump supporters are rabid. These people, if you put a bunch of Trump supporters and Sanders supporters in the other room, first they start fighting and then they start agreeing with each other. But Donald Trump, in the future of conservatism, he's not the political force he thinks he is. There's no guiding set of principles to Trumpism, just slogans and simplistic solutions, which is fine. But he's a vessel that many frustrated Americans have put their faith in. And win or lose, there's not going to be any lasting legacy of Trumpism. 20 years from now, the history books aren't going to say, here are the 5 points of Trumpism, because they aren't there. And he knows that. But the American people want a fighter. They're tired of electing people who are wishy-washy and don't have the guts to stand up. Now, how many people have seen the movie Braveheart? Right? Braveheart. You know about the Scottish Rebellion? William Wallace? Okay. Now, Mel Gibson's character, William Wallace, was a real historical figure. And he had a Donald Trump moment. When he rebelled against the English, he'd had enough. You people have been raping our women and pillaging our country and stealing everything that they've nailed down for years, you damn English. And I've about had enough. So he raised himself an army. And the goal was to free Scotland. But the Scottish nobles, unlike the peasants, they got a cushy deal with the English. As long as they keep the peasants down and keep, make sure that Scotland don't go crazy and revolt, they'll get money and they'll get land from the King of England. They behave, they get lands and wealth. If they step out of line, the English will punish them. Now, in that scene before the Battle of Stirling in the beginning, remember, they're all standing there, and the guys are talking. They're leaning on their spears, and the nobles won't ride up, right? And the guys go, oh, here we go again. You know, we marched our ass all the way out to this field. It was wet and damp. And our guys are going to go down and sell our ass out again, aren't they? Yeah, that's what they're going to do. That's what they always do, Luther. Right? So, who rides up? Wallace rides up. And the nobles tell him to butt out. And none of your affair. And they said, you should, Mr. Wallace, you pay us homage. And then he had a real Trump-like moment. He said, I pay homage to Scotland. Right? The peasant soldiers say, we're willing to fight. We ain't going to fight for them. And Wallace, in his great speech there, when he rallies him, it's the best halftime speech since Snoop Rocky. And he builds to a crescendo at the speech, and he goes, they may take our lives, but they will never take our freedom. Then they go down, and he leads them to victory. What happened to William Wallace eventually? The nobles turn him into the English. The establishment turns him in to save their skins once again. That's what they do every time. They will sell their souls. Now, Braveheart's just a movie. Donald Trump ain't William Wallace. He doesn't even look like Mel Gibson. But his message of standing up and putting up a fight for traditional America is resonating in this country. The Republican establishment is willing to surrender, like the Scottish nobles, even before the battle begins. Why do you think those guys spend all day sharpening them swords and spears? For what? And they're willing to sit on their hands if Trump is nominated, just like they sat on their hands when Goldwater got nominated. And if they do that, if they think they got a political problem now, they're going to have a problem 10 times worse. Because if Trump runs and wins, he might just be the battering ram they need to knock over the rest of this edifice of this crappy thing. And I'm not saying he will. I'm not a supporter. I'm just trying to give you my analysis. He might be the battering ram. Instead of talking nice to these people, he might be the president you need that says, hey, Paul Wright, so what do you need over there? Well, you've got to help with these Democrats. They're losers. We'll get them. Maybe he's the guy. Maybe we need somebody who's just going to tell it like it is. I don't know. But the peasants have been beaten down for so many years, they got nothing to lose. They're willing to follow a leader who promises them one more shot at glory. They want one more morning in America before they die. Conservatism is stronger than any one person, though. It survived the 64 shellacking, it survived 2 Bushes, and it will survive Donald Trump. In fact, it might even have a rebirth, who knows. Now, I also don't worry about the future because I went to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. And if you're worried about the future, the young people I saw there gave me hope. CPAC always makes sure that they have a lot of students there. They volunteer, but they also get to come as guests. And they give them a nice lower rate so that they can see all the events and participate in the process. And to watch these young people talking at each other, you know, arguing their points, arguing with their candidates, arguing about their issues, shaking hands, how can we do this? What can we do in the future? Blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, holy moly, I finally found it. Because I didn't know it existed like that. Yeah, you got the young Republicans and the young Democrats and the young whatevers at the college campus, but these people took a whole week just to get out of their lives to come and participate. And some of the speakers were people who started at CPAC and went to work for Goldwater or Reagan. The people that believe in this, not the fly-by-night people, not the consultants who are out for a paycheck. And after observing their enthusiasm and commitment, I thought, the core values of freedom, limited government, strict adherence to the original intent of the Constitution are still the bedrock for conservatism. and will remain so. Now, those of us who are running out of summers, we should take comfort in this battle that they're waging, because it means the torch has been passed to them, and it's in good hands, I can tell you. And I hope I live long enough to see them take over and see what they can do to preserve the Republic, given the mess we're leaving. Now, this election is more important than you think. I know you hear that every year. Oh, this is the most important. Well, facts finally caught up with that phrase. It is important. Because either we're going to break this country up into a set of tribes and a set of regions and break ourselves. We don't have to break apart the government like the Civil War, but it'll be just as bad. We can't have that. You know, when you go to a Cinco de Mayo parade, they should have American flags flying. You have the gay flag. Everybody's got a flag. There's one flag. It doesn't mean you're not proud of your heritage. It doesn't mean you can't celebrate something that reflects that. But when push comes to shove, it's that one over there, the ragged old flag that's been through hell. That's the one that's important. Now, we got to figure out if we're going to continue to be a republic, or like I said earlier, we're going to be like the Romans. And these are some of the things we got to ask ourselves. Will we continue to be treated as consumers, or are we citizens? Are we just data points out there for the government to count? Or are we citizens, rights? Are we going to stand up on our hind legs and say no? Or are we going to meekly go on? Will traditional American values survive? I remember growing up, you learned patriotic songs in school. Pledge of Allegiance was one of respect. Now, they're kind of options. We're going to have an optional this and an optional this. Well, let's just call ourselves optional Americans. We're a country, we're not a country that's held together by we're all the same ethnicity, or we're all the same religion, or we all adhere to some king or queen. By virtue of how this country was founded, we come from all over, but eventually, that's it. You learn English, you learn American history, you become a citizen of this country. I've been to citizenship ceremonies down in Sacramento. It's one of the greatest things you ever see. To see people in their best clothes work their butts off to get here legally with a flag. And they make that transition. They step across that invisible line from being whatever they were before to be able to say, I'm an American. Not a hyphenated American, but an American. Will the Constitution be adhered to, or just be an old parchment under glass at the National Archives? That's important. Will our children or grandchildren be debt slaves in the future, paying off our profligate spending, leaving them worse off than our parents left us? That's a crime. We should be arrested for that if we allow that to happen, and we have time. So it won't happen. Or are we going to sacrifice our own immediate pleasure and self-gratification and pay up the bills we've run up? And when the history of this time is written, will they say in 2016 we began to face up to our problems, or are they going to say we shrunk from our duty to generations not yet born? These are the critical questions we face. Finally, I'd like to end with a cautionary tale. Ronald Reagan used to tell a story about two friends of his. They were in Florida. This is in the 60s. And they're talking to a Cuban refugee. And the refugee's telling him his story. And one of the Americans turns to the other and says, "We don't know how lucky we are." The refugee said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape too." That told the whole story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand of freedom on earth. And if you don't think so, wait till you lose your freedom, as other countries have. We cannot allow that to happen, whether it's conservatism, libertarian, whatever the ism is, we all have to remember we are Americans. And when things get bad, we pull on the same end of the rope. And then we go back to arguing with each other after the work is done. But the work needs to be done now for the sake of the future. Thank you very much.
Questions? Have any questions?
What do you think's going to happen?
Aha! Well, the whole race is, if you look at it, everything's now focused on what's going to have Trump and Cruz, right? But there's one person who's going to decide how this thing might go. His name is James Comey, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who's investigating Hillary Clinton. If Mr. Comey makes a criminal referral to the Justice Department, she might get indicted. Now, even if they don't indict her, a criminal referral means they got to commit a crime. Now, you remember this kid they gave Pagliano, they gave him immunity? He put the server in her house. FBI don't give you immunity so they can sit down and have a coffee with you. They walk up, listen, I've been interviewed by the FBI, I know how it works. They walk in and they say, here's what we got. We got you on 2 crimes. You want to talk? What? They don't spend money on investigations unless they have some. They got 150 agents working on this thing. My guess is they're going to refer a criminal referral, and while the Republican race is coming to an end, let's face it, it's going to end at California. It might even end before that. Trump's going to get what he wants, probably. That's just the way it is. You don't like it, you just have to suck it up and pull on your end of the rope. But if they do that, all of a sudden the turmoil shifts to the Democrats. What are they going to do? You're gonna nominate somebody who's under a criminal referral? That's why Bernie Sanders is hanging in for 2 reasons, and I think he's right. One, he's hanging in because he wants to change his party's platform and pull it more to the left. You don't have to be left or right. You have to understand he has a mission, and he has every right to do what he's doing. He wants to make sure that the next time somebody runs, there's not 500 superdelegates who he'd be tied right now almost without the superdelegates. So anyway, you're going to see turmoil. They're going to be running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Trump will allow Trump to consolidate his position. They're going to go through hell. And even if it's not a full criminal referral, it's going to be something. And if friends of mine in Washington tell me, Patrick, get ready for the earthquake. Because Comey is not going to sit here and let her off the hook. And it has nothing to do with the server. The server was the means. It has to do with corruption, public corruption. That's what they're looking at between the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. I think she might not even be the nominee. Yes?
Even if she isn't better than Obama's new partner.
Terrific. Even better. But a partner heading out the door. To nominate somebody who's under that cloud,
Democrats don't care.
they might not get, yes they do. They care. They want to extend, look at, they've had 8 years of a guy, Marco Rubio, remember the debate when he got in trouble because he repeated himself 2 or 3 times? Oh, look, he's repeating himself. Typical media. Oh, look, he's repeating himself. Forget that he repeated himself, what he said. He said Obama knows exactly what he's doing. Right? And he does. And he's been doing it for 8 years. And the Republicans have been going, oh my God, how do we stop him? There's 535 of you guys. You can't stop one fellow? So what happens is, I think that Obama, he might partner, but it'll be too late. I think they're either going to push Joe Biden into this deal. It'll be a compromise. I think they might push Elizabeth Warren into this deal. It might not be Bernie Sanders. But something's coming. The earthquake is coming. And it's going to shift, and you're going to watch the media coverage shift because the media likes nothing more than car wrecks and political intrigue. They prefer parties.
I have a question though. The current president or some other future sympathetic president, do you think there's a possibility that he or she might use the pardoning power to pardon Miss Clinton if she were to be indicted, convicted?
Well, remember, Ford pardoned Nixon, right?
Yeah.
And then there was no trial or anything. He just gave him I'll just give you a get out of jail free card. Yeah, he could do that on the way out, but he can't do it in the middle of a campaign. No way. You do that in the middle of a campaign, he's not that crazy. And you remember, Bill Clinton said some pretty nasty things about Barack Obama. And if Barack Obama thinks that the Democrats can slip somebody in there fresh, they'll do it. They win. And they don't, and unlike the Republicans who would have 6 meetings and hand-wringing about what to do, the Democrats just say, do it. They're much better street fighter. Conservatives for years haven't learned how to bare knuckle fighting. We're about to learn. Yes, sir.
You mentioned something about the bureaucracies, especially on the national level, but do we not have the same problem right here in the state with all of our agencies? You know, the legislature just says, here, agency, go do your thing and make these regulations, and everybody has to live by them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't that like one of our biggest problems in this state?
It's worse here. It's worse here because there's no check. We live in a one-party state.
Yeah.
I saw the Republican Party yesterday put out a new tax proposal. It's terrible. A lot of little small ball stuff. Tax credit for this, tax credit for that. How about kick the thing over and get a new tax system? You know, California was just ranked as the state least able to absorb the next recession. And we're headed for it. We're the least prepared. Because if we get hit with a recession, what happens? The guy at the top doesn't make as much, so he doesn't pay as much capital gains, and you know what runs downhill. Because the plumber will tell you, lady, I get paid on Friday, and shit don't run uphill. So the guy at the bottom gets hurt. Yes, this state is in deep trouble because of that. But say, there's no check on it. There's no opposition party. They do whatever they want. They gavel hearings. The Republicans, you know, I'm a big fan of school choice. I'm very much for school choice and vouchers. Because I've seen it work in other places. Washington, D.C., they had the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program. They had only like 4,000 slots. 10,000 poor people showed up, parents of poor kids. That program produces 98% of the kids who go through this program go on to college. These kids are growing up in the worst places in Washington, D.C., right? Because of that program. The Democrats wanted to kill it because the teachers' union didn't like it. And the Catholic Church, whose tuition was $12,000 annually, lowered it to meet so they could use the voucher. They said, we'll eat the cost so we can get these kids a leg up. Have you ever seen the Republicans in the state assembly propose anything like that? They don't. It's like I was saying earlier. You propose stuff. If they say no, keep proposing it. They shouldn't even draw paychecks because they don't do anything. They're seat warmers to make the room look full. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. If you're going to fight in this business, you fight with all your might, and you put out ideas, you keep pushing ideas out there. And some of them are going to stick. You think you ever seen a Republican go to a black church? I'd like to go in and I'd tell them, you know something? You guys have been getting hosed all these years. These guys up in Sacramento, they don't want your kids to do any better. They like the system as it is. Only you're the S end of the stick, aren't you? Now, we're conservatives. We haven't been here before. That's on us. But you got to stop voting for these guys because they're not helping your kids at all. That's courage. We have cowards running the parties. Yes, sir.
I think one of the most important things you mentioned is going to be the appointment of the Supreme Court justices.
I don't want to think about it, but yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But see, again, we've treated politics as a spectator sport. When you watch a debate now, and they're not debates, and when you watch a town hall that aren't town halls, you know what a town hall is? It's like New England, where you got the board of aldermen sitting up at the dais, right? And a guy walks up and he says something, right? They all talk about an issue facing the town. You know there, Bob, I think we ought to make sure the roof on the church is fixed. How many say aye? You know, that's a town hall. Not this manufactured BS they got. But look when you watch a debate. We have the pregame, right? It's like a football game. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, we're sitting here in the great hall. Oh, it's full to the brim, and we're all waiting with great anticipation for the debate to begin. I'm here with my colleague and analyst, right? Turn off the sound. You'll think you're watching a football game. You'll think you're watching the pregame for the Super Bowl. And then when the debate starts, the three moderators are there. You have to have somebody with a short skirt. And two guys with square jaws, right? And they talking about themselves. I don't know how you feel, Megan, but I feel terrific. Oh yes, Brett, we're going to have a wonderful time tonight. This isn't about you, it's about the people. So we've turned our politics into this, it's just another reality TV show. No wonder Trump's doing well. The attention span of the American people sometimes is like a bug hitting your windshield driving down I-5 in the summertime. So, yeah, Supreme Court. It's going to be dangerous. But you know what might happen? If Hillary got elected or a Democrat got elected, the guy that's there now, Garland, they might approve him in a lame duck. That's what they did. Figuring he's not as bad as what I could get.